Hello, I'm Aileen Carroll, sommelier with Lynfred Winery, and welcome to our guided virtual vertical Viognier tasting. So we call this a vertical tasting because we have wines made from the same grape, but they are in increasing years of vintage. So we have a 2015, 2016, and 2017 Viognier to enjoy today. Vintage, of course, refers to the year in which the grapes are grown, and I absolutely love this vertical format, not only because Viognier is amazing and in my opinion is not nearly as popular as it deserves to be, but secondly, because we do have the same grape in different years, that allows us to compare some really cool subtleties and understand a little bit deeper all the factors that go into affecting how a wine tastes. So Viognier is pronounced Viognier. It has its origins in southern France, but might possibly be even older, like ancient Croatia having been brought to southern France by the Romans. So it is similar to Chardonnay in that it is a nice, rich, full-bodied white wine, but it is unique in being one of the most deliciously floral wines in its aromatics. Flavor-wise, we have a lot of peach, apricot, and tropical fruit notes, but as we'll see, there's plenty of room for variation there based on different variations in the factors that affect how the wine tastes. So getting onto those factors, I like to lay out a framework of 3 easy general categories of things that affect the way a wine tastes. So first, we have the grape itself, of course. In this case, we do have 3 different Viogniers. And even though we have the same grape in all these cases, there is a little bit of variation in terms of the age of the vines that the Viognier grapes come from here. So older vines versus newer vines have different effects on how a wine turns out. An old vine actually won't produce quite as many grapes as a young vine. But this really isn't a bad thing, quite the opposite, because what the less grapes on an old vine get are all of the nutrients, all of the water that are going to that vine. So even though there's less grapes, they're more concentrated because they're getting more of the water, more of the nutrients. Also, since the roots of an old vine are so deep, there's more consistent and reliable access to that water and nutrient source. So that allows for really consistent, even, full ripening in grapes that come from old vines. So we have 2 vintages among these 3 that the Viognier grapes come from an old vine. So as we go on and taste them, we're going to be looking out to see if we can spot which 2 come from old vines. So the other factor that affects how a wine turns out is everything about the specific climate, geography, soil type, even the weather in different years. So there's a fancy French word called terroir, which summarizes all of those climatic and geographical factors that can affect how a wine tastes. And in this case, all 3 of these vintages were amazing years of weather for California. So really that's the only variation that we have there in terms of terroir, because they all do come from the Lodi region of California, which is in the Central Valley viticultural area, and that's about 75 miles southeast of Napa Valley. So the climate is Mediterranean, nice and warm and smooth and steady. But there is a little bit of variation in one of the years of weather that we have represented in these vintages here. So one year, and I'm not going to tell you which yet, because we're going to be able to, again, see if we can pick out this different weather year. So what happened in one of these 3 vintages was a really warm winter and spring that caused the grapevines to bloom and bud much earlier than usual, but then that was followed later by a cold snap, which caused uneven fruit setting. So that means that not all of the buds and blooms had the chance to turn into grapes, and this produced an effect very similar to the effect of old vines that I already mentioned. Since we had less grapes in each of the clusters on each of the vines, the grapes that did exist got more of the nutrients, more of the water, so we have full body and really condensed flavors, again, similar to the effect of the old vines. So one of these vintages we can expect to have even more rich and condensed flavors than the others. So we'll be seeing if we can spot that. And I know we're getting thirsty, but I'm just gonna finish with the third factor that affects how a wine tastes. And those are the winemaking choices that occur in the winery after the grapes are already grown and picked. So oak is a thing in this category that drastically affects the flavor, but in this case we don't have any oak on any of these Viogniers. They were all aged in stainless steel. One cool winemaking effect or technique that we have represented here is something called sur lie aging, which is the French term for aging on the lees. So what all that means is we know that in order to make a wine, you take grape juice, you add yeast, and the yeast eats the sugars in the grape and turns that into alcohol. So usually once this fermentation process is complete, the leftover dead already processed yeast gets filtered out, but a winemaker can choose to leave the dead yeast or lees in there. I know that sounds kind of gross, why would they want to do that? But it has really delicious effects. So think of like the creaminess of texture and flavor of like a brioche bun. That kind of creamy bread-like flavor gets added to the wine by leaving the lees in there. So 2 out of the 3 vintages here have the use of sur lie aging, and based on that effect that I described, it has a kind of creamy, good bread-like flavor and texture. We'll see if we can spot those 2. So again, the 3 main things that affect how a wine tastes is the grape itself, including the age of the vines, then we have terroir, and then we have winemaking choices. So 2 out of these, old vine, 1, that unique year of weather, that'll have even more condensed flavors for us, and then again 2 out of 3 have the sur lie aging technique. So enough talk, let's enjoy a glass of wine. I spilled some, need to work on my swirling when I'm looking away from the glass. So first we're gonna start with the 2015 Viognier. And right away, you should be able to smell that awesomely intense, characteristic floral aroma. In this case, definitely like honeysuckle for sure. So I know I kept everyone waiting long enough. Let's dive right in, cheers. So since we have such subtle differences between these 3 wines, I thought it would be a good time to lay out another useful framework for helping to improve your own tasting palette and your ability to pick out subtle differences in flavors. So basically when it comes to white wine, there are 3 camps of fruit flavors that we can expect to find. We have citrus, orchard fruit, and tropical fruit. So orchard fruit is going to include apples, pears, apricot, peaches. All of those are orchard fruits. So when you're approaching a white wine and what it tastes like isn't just like jumping right out at you where you can easily identify it, you can kind of jog your own imagination by asking yourself, okay, am I tasting citrus? Am I tasting orchard fruit? Or am I tasting tropical fruit? So approaching this wine again and doing a better swirl for you. I would say we're mostly in the orchard fruit and tropical fruit categories here. So once we have that picked out, we'll focus on the tropical fruit. Then we can ask our imagination, okay, well, which tropical fruits am I tasting? And just think of all the tropical fruits you can think of and see if any of those flavors are represented. So does it taste like banana? Maybe a little tiny bit. Maybe a little bit of coconut. I want you to look out for papaya and mango. I'd say that's where most of the tropical fruit flavor is kind of in that area. So a white wine isn't going to have like just one flavor category represented. There's usually a little bit of all 3, usually 2 more than the others. So thinking back to the orchard fruits, We have definitely some like peach and apricot notes here, and really not that much citrus, maybe a little bit of like a sweet lemon rind, I would say. So once you have kind of jogged your imagination and picked out a few fruit flavors, then you can get even more specific by asking about the color and quality of the fruit that you're tasting. So for example, if we said we were tasting yellow apple, you can ask yourself, okay, is it like a really tart, underripe yellow apple? Is it like a juicy, ripe yellow apple? Or is it almost like a kind of matured, baked yellow apple kind of taste? So going back to the fruits that we picked out, the tropical fruits, I'd say like the mango are kind of in the juicy to baked category. And then the peaches, we can ask both about the color and the quality. I'd say definitely like a juicy, juicy yellow peach, maybe even kind of like a peach pie. And likewise with the apricot, a little bit more matured, baked flavors there. So now as you're tasting each one, remember, besides just expanding our palate and picking out these differences in fruit quality, we're trying to be little wine detectives and see if we can figure out which two come from old vines. That's going to have really condensed, rich flavors. We're also looking for that even more condensed flavor that's going to be represented by that one unique year of weather among the vintages. And then lastly, we're also looking for which two are Sur-Lie aged, and those are going to be nice and creamy. So see if you're noticing that. So moving on to our next wine, the 2016 Viognier. I just want to point out, you can tell there is like quite a bit of difference in color. Let's see, can I hold it over the white there for you so you can see better? Yeah. So the 2015 is a little bit richer, a little bit more golden in color, whereas the 2016 is kind of more in like a light straw color camp there for sure. Smelling it, there should be quite a bit of difference for you too from the 2015. We definitely still have those floral characteristics, but I'd say it's almost a little bit more like white flowers, bright yellow flowers, kind of like daisy and mostly lily, I want to say. So it is a little bit harder to pick out non-fruit flavors and smells just because we do encounter fruit on a hopefully pretty regular basis, but we don't always stop and smell the flowers, and even less of us stop and smell the rocks. I mention that because if you approach this one again, there's almost a kind of like chalky minerality, almost like a limestone quality. And all that kind of comes with time. I'm like serious about stopping and smelling the flowers. You don't have to be a crazy sommelier and go around licking rocks so that you know what limestone tastes like, but definitely stop and smell the flowers and the rocks too, but maybe don't lick them. You can leave that to us sommeliers. So diving into the taste of the second one, way more crisp than the first one. That definitely had some creaminess to it. In terms of our fruit camps, I would say we have a lot of citrus and orchard fruit in this one and a little bit less on the tropical fruit end. So, all right, so we've got citrus. So think of all the citrus fruits you can think of. Do we have lemon? Yeah, definitely. A little bit on like the kind of sweeter, creamy side. Again, like kind of a candied, like lemon curd. A lot of grapefruit, I want to say, like a nice, bright, almost yellow, maybe even like a white grapefruit. This one's really good. So then in terms of orchard fruit, I want to say definitely peach again, and then ask yourself about like the color and the quality. So what kind of peach is it? I'd say more of, again, like a white peach, definitely in the tart to juicy camp, like ripe, not overripe and baked like we saw in the first one. So yeah, overall, white flowers, white rocks, white peaches, white grapefruit, really, really crisp on this one. So keep that in mind as we're still trying to think of which of the two comes from old vines, which one has that interesting year of weather, and which two are surly aged. So feel free to wait until we've tried all three to solve that mystery with me. Moving on to our 2017. Here we have a little bit more of like that golden, rich color that we saw in the first one. Very floral, more like honeysuckle, definitely like yellow flower. And that main smell, I'd say that's in the orchard fruit camp. If you haven't tasted or smelled an apricot in a little while, just use this as your reference point. Like, that is just like apricot in a glass. Really nice and bright and rich and fruity, gorgeous. So in terms of like the fruit quality, I would say again that this is a little bit more in the baked category, like more similar to the 2015 than the 2016. Pretty rich flavors. A little tiny bit of minerality there still too, just a hint of crispness, so it's like really nice and balanced. Like we have the rich fruit, but still a little bit of the crispness. Overall, I would say that this one is again pretty creamy. So obviously continue to enjoy these. Take a minute to think about it, drink about it, sip about it. We're gonna see now, based on our tasting notes, if we can determine those three fun little mysteries that I laid out. So, of these three wines, the two that come from old vines are gonna have richer, more condensed flavors than the other one. So, I think it's pretty clear which one was a little bit lighter, a little bit crisper. That's definitely our 2016. So by process of elimination, the two wines that come from old vines are the 2015 and the 2017. So awesome job if you were able to pick that out on your own. And then we had that one interesting year of weather that had an effect, kind of like enhancing that effect that the old vines have, where we have even more condensed and rich flavors. So ask yourself, between the 2015 and the 2017, which one had even richer, more robust, concentrated flavors? Take a minute to think about it. Maybe go ahead and compare them again. That's one of the benefits of doing a wine flight. So there's the 17 verse the 15, in my opinion, does have an even more dense, rich kind of flavor profile, and 2015 is in fact the year where we had the uneven fruit setting, so the grapes that did emerge got even richer and more condensed flavors because they were getting all the water and nutrients. So good job, virtual high five, if you were able to pick out that one vintage. Lastly, we were looking out for creaminess and kind of a bread-like bit of aroma or taste in 2 out of the 3. We had that surly aging. So take a minute to think about that. Look back at your notes. Which 2 were a little bit on the creamier side? Again, it's the 2015 and 2017 that have that surly aging technique represented. So awesome job. Thank you for playing along with the little mystery. And I just want to emphasize at this point that the cool thing about learning about these different wine techniques and the different factors that affect how a wine tastes isn't just to like sound smart and fancy, although it's kind of a fun, I don't know, party trick, I guess. And it's not about like learning what is good and what is bad. I really want to emphasize that learning about wine is helpful because it helps you better understand why you like the wines that you like. It's not about trying to change anybody's taste. It's just giving you a better understanding of the different processes and factors that affect how wine tastes. So in learning about old vines versus new vines or surly aging, that's kind of letting you better understand what goes into developing the flavors that you personally enjoy. So maybe today you learned that you really like that kind of creamy flavor and texture of the use of surly aging, so you can go out and look for more wines that are aged on the lees. Or maybe you prefer that crispness and a little bit of that delicious rock taste that we get in the 2016. So for you, you'd probably like a little bit younger of a vintage, a little more vibrant, younger vines as well, and look for descriptors of flavors like minerality, that kind of thing on the bottle if that's what you learned that you enjoy. So one thing that I didn't talk about earlier because I didn't want to keep us all thirsty for too long is aging, which is of course relevant here since not only do we have different vintages, but the 2015's been hanging out in the bottle for quite a while now. So we hear a lot about aging when it comes to red wine, but not so much when it comes to white wine, and there's a pretty good reason for that. So the main reason that a wine would need to be aged is also the same reason why a wine can handle aging. So in red wine, we have a lot of tannin, which is that aspect of a wine that makes your mouth feel pretty dry, and that comes from the grape skin. So red wine is fermented with the grape skins in there, whereas white wine is not. You just press the grapes, take the juice, and ferment the juice, so there's no grape skins in there. Hardly any tannin. So tannin is something that usually in red wine you want to soften, and that's one reason why red wine gets better as it ages, because those tannins become softer, but they're also important because they play a kind of preservative role in the aging process. So again, the tannins are in there as the reason that the wine needs to be aged, and also a reason why it can handle aging. So even though there's no tannin really in white wine, there is alcohol, which is another preservative aspect of the aging process. There is a lot of variation, however, among white wines in terms of alcohol content. Moscato, for example, has only about 10% alcohol, which isn't enough to keep the wine preserved as it ages. Viognier, however, is anywhere between, we have 13% alcohol in the 2016, and then the 2015 and 2017 are a little bit higher alcohol, almost as much as a red wine, coming in at about 14%. And extra points to you if you're thinking that the reason why they have a little bit higher alcohol content is because they came from old vines, which got fuller and richer because there were less grapes in the bunch. So that's why they have a little higher alcohol. So because they do have that higher alcohol content, Viogniers on the whole, as well as Chardonnays, are pretty much the only white wines that do quite well when aged, because that alcohol acts like a preservative measure. So that answers why Viognier can handle aging, but it doesn't yet answer the question of why you would want to age a Viognier. So there are two things that happen when a white wine ages, one kind of superficial and the other one more substantial. So superficially, as a wine ages, the color of it is going to get richer and darker. So the 2015 is indeed richer and darker in color than the 2016. And the reason for that leads us into the more substantial effect that aging white wine has. Ever so small amounts of oxygen are coming into contact with the wine as it's aging, and that's darkening the color. But what that little tiny bit of oxidization also does is moves our fruit quality from nice and tart and ripe perhaps at the beginning. It's going to move it more over to the matured, baked, stewed end of the spectrum, and that's because of that little bit of interaction with oxygen. So again, learning about what you like. If you like more of those richer, more matured, baked flavors, you might want to look for a white wine that's a little bit older, whereas if you like that bit more vibrant crispness, kind of tart fruit aspect to wines, then I would recommend you look for younger vintages of white wine the next time you go out. So I know one thing that we do all like, and that is pairing food and wine together. So I'm going to offer some overall pairing recommendations for Viognier as a whole, and then since we did such excellent sipping and sleuthing and learning about the subtleties of the different vintages, I'll offer some vintage specific pairing recommendations. So overall, since Viognier is so nice and rich and full, almost to the point of having like a hint of sweetness to it, that makes it a perfect wine to pair with any kind of spicy food or spicy cuisine, because that rich, almost sweet quality is going to balance out the spiciness of the food. So any spicy Chinese food, Thai food, especially Indian food, is going to be awesome as a choice to accompany Viognier. When we get a little bit more specific in terms of the different vintages, thinking about food pairings, the two main things to remember overall with any food and wine pairing is you want to match intensity, matching the intensity of the wine, of the flavors of it, with the intensity of the flavors of the food, and then also just thinking about matching flavors. So if there was a particular fruit or flavor that stood out in the wine, it would be a good idea to pair that with a dish that had a similar flavor highlight. So, because I like to make this seem more interactive and play another little virtual game, I'm going to offer you a 3-course meal, appetizer, entree, and dessert, and then you can see if you can figure out which of our 3 vintages should accompany which aspect of our 3-course meal that we're going to imagine. So as our appetizer, we have oysters on the half shell with a lemongrass mignonette, which is just a fancy word for an oyster sauce. For our entree, we're going to be having a spicy Spanish paella with mango and chorizo. And then for the dessert finale, imagine a baked brie cheese with apricot jam. So take a minute to drink about it, to think about it. Think back to our wines, remembering that the 2015 was extra rich, extra condensed. We had tropical fruit flavors there. Our 2016 was lighter, crisper, definitely had a bit of citrus and minerality to it. And then our 2017 mostly had that apricot flavor as its standout characteristic. So think of the order they should be served in to accompany our 3-course meal. Starting with the appetizer, we've got the crisp minerality of the 2016 Viognier. So also, because it's a little bit lighter, we're matching intensity, because a raw oyster, yeah, it has a pretty intense flavor, but compared to like a pasta covered in marinara sauce, an oyster is a little bit on the lighter side, and we're matching that mineral characteristic. Then, to accompany our spicy Spanish paella that has chorizo and mango, I was kind of hoping the mango would be a giveaway, to our 2015 that had a lot more tropical fruit and was really, really rich, the richest of the 3. So that's why I think this one would be best to balance out the spiciness of the entree. And then that, of course, leaves our predominantly apricot flavored 2017 to accompany the baked brie with apricot jam. So I really hope that you learned more about why you like what you like in this guided Viognier tasting. And just remember that there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to why you like what you like, and there's really no right or wrong answer when it comes to food pairing. Like, I know I laid out some general principles that can help guide you towards what's a good match, but if you like Shiraz or, Cabernet with your oysters, go right ahead. It's really more of an art than a science. The only thing that would be wrong is to drink a wine that you don't like, in my opinion. So if you are interested in ordering more of any of the amazing Viogniers featured in our tasting today, just check out our website, lynfredwinery.com. And of course, there's plenty of other amazing wines for you to choose from there. You can also purchase another tasting kit if you want to join me again sometime. And I really hope that you do. And remember, even though we might be separate, that doesn't mean we can't enjoy a glass of wine together, have some fun, and hopefully learn a little bit in the process too. So cheers, and I'll see you again soon.